Have you ever wondered what should be done when a foreign government is ruled by a corrupt ruler that's abusing human rights? Should the US even get involved, and are we complicit if we don't? Now by now you're probably thinking something along the lines of, yeah, Austin, all the time. What am I, a nerd? And well, yeah, you'd be completely justified in that thinking. But I actually think that it's important that we have a good idea not only of what's going on around us, but how our government is representing us as a people. So in today's speech, I first want to define what one of these such methods is. I want to secondly look at how it's currently being used in Venezuela, and I'm going to finish showing you the current statistical and factual effects that it's had on Venezuela. But first we have to define what one of these such methods is, and it's called an embargo. Now dictionary.com defines an embargo as any restriction imposed upon commerce by edict, especially against a certain country, as a penalty or to induce compliance with demands or legal obligations. So in other words, an embargo is just a ban on trade with another country. Now this could be on trade as a whole, meaning you won't trade anything with that country, or it could just be on a specific item, such as oil, meaning you just won't trade oil with that country. Now an embargo is typically put in place to make a government comply with some kind of demands, such as stopping human rights abuses. So there's going to be restrictions to have that embargo removed. So let's just go through an example. Let's say that one day the US gets mad at Sweden because they changed the flavor of their Swedish fish, which would obviously be the most criminal thing you could do, assuming they're already a perfect snack. So the US says, until you go back to the original Swedish fish flavor, we're not going to trade with you. Now let's say that Sweden added yet another flavor, that would result in a setback because that was a clear violation of the restrictions that the US put in place. But as soon as Sweden goes back to the original Swedish fish flavor, trade can once again happen. Now you're all inevitably thinking about one question right now, and that is, are Swedish fish really from Sweden? And yes, for both the purpose of this speech and this analogy, they absolutely are. But now that we understand what an embargo is, let's take a look at why we have one on Venezuela. Now really the bottom line of reasoning for this embargo is simple. The president of Venezuela, Maduro, is a terrible, terrible person. According to the National Post, his special armed forces killed 5,300 people in 2019 alone. According to the same source, it's estimated that 4 million people have fled a Maduro-led Venezuela, and that the refugee crisis from Venezuela might actually top out Syria's for the worst of all time. So in response to this, the US placed an embargo on Venezuela in an attempt to do one of two things. Now, the Wall Street Journal describes the first of these options when it says the US imposed an embargo against Venezuela in an attempt to put pressure on Maduro and hopefully remove him from office. So when we place this embargo, is an attempt to either get Maduro to step down on his own, or as the Daily Nation describes, if economic collapse doesn't lead to Maduro stepping down, the military may take action to remove him. So the idea behind this embargo was either to get Maduro to step down on his own due to the economic pressure, or if that didn't happen, to have the military rise up and take him out. But now that we both understand what an embargo is and why it's in place, let's take a look at the current statistical and factual results that it's had on Venezuela. Now all the statistics I'm going to read to you are from WOLA.org, the Advocacy for the Human Rights in Americas. And it says that this embargo causes Venezuela to lose $11 billion annually. It says that the monthly average public imports dropped by 46% in 2019, or to $500 million, and an additional 50% on top of that in 2020, or to $250 million. Human rights groups, humanitarian organizations, and private companies have seen their bank accounts frozen and legitimate transactions frozen for long amounts of time. Now, despite all of these facts, Maduro is still in power in Venezuela. So let's just sum up everything that we've gone over in today's speech. First, we looked at what an embargo is. It's a ban on trade between two countries. This could be a trade as a whole, or just on a specific item such as Swedish fish. Then we looked at why there's an embargo on Venezuela. It's because the president is a terrible person who's abusing human rights, and we were attempting to either get him to step down on his own due to economic pressure, or have the military rise up and take him out. Lastly, we looked at the negative effects that this embargo has had on Venezuela, and then we looked at the fact that Maduro is still in power. So before I walk away, I just want to leave you with a few questions. Should the US remove this embargo on Venezuela, since it seems like the only people it's hurting is the Venezuelan people, and the president doesn't want to seem to step down? Or would we simply be getting rid of all the getting rid of all the leverage that we've gained in Venezuela in the last few years? Thank you.